The boardroom was filled with tension as Ethan Carter, the charismatic and commanding CEO of Carter Enterprises, paced back and forth. His perfectly tailored suit reflected his stature, but his usual air of confidence was fractured by the weight of the latest headlines. The tabloids were relentless, publishing every fabricated rumor about his personal life. His investors were getting nervous, and the board was demanding he clean up his image. Fast. Across the room, Emma Hayes sat quietly, her fingers gripping the edge of her notepad. She had been Ethan's assistant for 3 years, and while she admired his brilliance, she'd also learned how to navigate his sharp temper and high expectations. She had never seen him this rattled. Ethan stopped pacing and turned to face her, his piercing gray eyes locking onto hers. "Emma," he said, his voice low but decisive, "I need your help." Emma straightened in her seat, unsure where this was going. "Of course, Mr. Carter. What do you need?" He hesitated for a moment, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. "The board is pressuring me to fix my public image. They think I'm too much of a liability, and the investors are starting to agree." Emma frowned, confused. "But what does that have to do with me?" Ethan exhaled sharply as if steeling himself. "I need a wife, Emma. Someone who can neutralize the scandal and make me look stable in the public eye. Someone trustworthy." The room fell silent as his words hung in the air. Emma blinked, her heart racing. "You're joking, right?" "I'm completely serious," Ethan said, his tone unyielding. "This isn't about romance or love. It's a business arrangement. You'll be well compensated, and after a year, we can go our separate ways." Emma stared at him, stunned. The idea was absurd. Marriage as a business strategy? But she could see the desperation in his eyes, the rare vulnerability he rarely showed anyone. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Because I trust you," Ethan said simply. "You've been by my side for years. You know how to handle the press, the board, and me, and..." He hesitated, softening slightly. "You're the only person I know who isn't after my money or status." Emma felt a pang of something she couldn't quite define. Flattery, maybe, or disbelief. She knew Ethan's world was cutthroat, full of people who wanted something from him, but the idea of stepping into that world herself, even temporarily, felt overwhelming. "I don't know, Ethan," she said finally. "This is a lot." "I won't force you," he said, his tone more measured now, "but I need you to think about it. The media is already circling like vultures, and if I don't act fast, it could cost me everything." Emma swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had her own reasons for keeping a low profile, secrets she had buried long ago. Agreeing to Ethan's plan would put her in the spotlight, a place she had avoided for years. But saying no felt impossible when he looked at her with such unwavering confidence that she could fix this. "Okay," she said softly, almost surprising herself. "I'll do it." Ethan's expression shifted, a flicker of relief breaking through his tension. "You won't regret this, Emma." She nodded, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach. What she didn't realize was that agreeing to this arrangement would unravel everything she had tried to keep hidden and change both of their lives forever. The wedding was everything Ethan's PR team had envisioned. Intimate, elegant, and meticulously curated to project an image of stability and success. The venue was a historic estate on the city's outskirts, surrounded by manicured gardens and towering oak trees. The guest list was small but strategic, just family, board members, and a handful of influential investors. Emma stood in front of the mirror in the bridal suite, smoothing her hands over the delicate lace of her simple yet beautiful wedding dress. The stylist had done an incredible job transforming her into the picture-perfect bride, but inside she felt anything but. "You look stunning," Ethan's assistant Claire said with a warm smile as she adjusted the veil. "Honestly, this whole thing might actually fool the press." Emma gave her a weak smile, her nerves threatening to get the better of her. She hadn't slept much since agreeing to Ethan's plan, her mind plagued with questions. What if she couldn't pull it off? What if someone uncovered her secret? A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Ethan. He stepped inside, his sharp tuxedo tailored to perfection. His presence filled the room as it always did, and for a moment, Emma forgot how to breathe. "You ready?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with an undertone of anxiety. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, managing a small smile. Ethan studied her for a moment, his usually guarded expression softening. "Thank you for doing this, Emma. I know it's not what you imagine for yourself, but it means a lot." She nodded, unsure how to respond. "Let's just hope this works," she said quietly. "It will," he said with a certainty that both reassured and unsettled her. The ceremony was a blur. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers, and polite applause rippled through the audience. To the outside world, they looked like the perfect couple. Ethan, the stoic and successful CEO, and Emma, the loyal and poised assistant who had become his partner in every sense of the word. But as they stood on the estate's grand staircase for their first official photos as husband and wife, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking a tightrope. Ethan's arm rested lightly around her waist, his grip firm but not overbearing. She glanced up at him, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. "You're doing great," he murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. Emma forced a smile for the cameras, knowing she'd have to get used to this, pretending, performing, playing the role of a devoted wife. But as the flashes continued to go off, she couldn't stop her mind from drifting to the past, to the secret she'd buried so deeply that even Ethan, the man who now called her his wife, didn't have a clue. Later that evening, as the guests mingled and the PR team celebrated the success of the event, Emma found a quiet moment alone on the balcony. The cool night air was a welcome reprieve from the crowded reception, but her thoughts offered no such relief. She heard the faint creak of the door behind her and turned to see Ethan stepping out, a glass of champagne in hand. "Hiding from our own party?" he asked with a small smirk. Emma shrugged. "Just needed some air." He walked over, leaning against the railing beside her. "It went well, don't you think?" "It did," she admitted, glancing out at the city lights in the distance. "But this is just the beginning, isn't it?" Ethan's smirk faded, replaced by something more thoughtful. "Yeah, it is. But I meant what I said, Emma. You don't have to worry. I'll make sure this works for both of us." She nodded, appreciating his effort to reassure her, but the weight of her own secret made it hard to fully believe him. As the party continued inside, Ethan and Emma stood in silence on the balcony, two people bound by an arrangement that was already beginning to feel far more complicated than either of them had anticipated. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew the real challenges were yet to come. In the weeks that followed the wedding, the charade of marriage began to settle into a strange rhythm. To the world, Ethan and Emma were the perfect couple, attending gala events together, holding hands at business meetings, and smiling for the cameras at every opportunity. Their public image had shifted from scandalous to aspirational, and the media's frenzy over their union started to die down. But behind closed doors, the truth of their arrangement lingered like a silent specter. Emma still spent her days as Ethan's assistant, managing his schedule, dealing with his high-profile clients, and overseeing the daily operations of Carter Enterprises. It was the life she had always known. But now, there was an invisible wall between them, one built on the understanding that this was all for show. One evening, after a long day of back-to-back meetings, Emma sat at her desk in Ethan's office, reviewing documents. The office was quiet, save for the soft hum of the city below. Ethan had just left for an overseas business trip, and she relished the rare moment of solitude. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a text from her younger sister, Leah. "I need to talk. Something's come up." Emma frowned. Leah rarely asked for anything serious, and the urgency in her message made her stomach twist. She quickly typed a response. "I'll call you in a few." As soon as the call connected, Leah's voice was frantic. "Emma, something's wrong. I think I'm pregnant." Emma's heart dropped. "What? Leah, are you sure?" "I'm not sure of anything, Emma," Leah replied, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to do." Emma leaned back in her chair, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She had always been protective of Leah, the one who had taken care of her after their parents died. But this was different. "Listen," Emma said, her voice steady despite the panic rising within her. "You need to go to the doctor, get a test, and we'll figure this out. I'm here for you. I don't want to do this alone, Emma. I need you." Emma's mind raced. She had always kept her personal life separate from her marriage to Ethan, but this could destroy everything. What if Ethan found out? What if someone else did? Leah, I'm coming to see you tomorrow, Emma said, her voice firm. We'll talk about this face to face, okay? But you need to promise me you'll be careful. Don't make any decisions without me. I promise. I'll wait for you. Emma ended the call, her hands trembling. She stared at her phone, the weight of the situation sinking in. She had always kept her past buried, her family's struggles, the pain of losing their parents, the secrets she'd held on to for so long. But now everything was beginning to unravel, piece by piece. Just then, the door to Ethan's office creaked open. Emma quickly wiped away the tear that had slipped down her cheek. Ethan walked in, his face soft but tired from his flight. How's everything going? He asked, sensing her unease. Emma forced a smile. Fine, just catching up on some work. Ethan nodded, then paused as he stepped closer to her desk. Emma, he began, his voice tinged with curiosity. There's something different about you lately. You've been distant. Is everything okay? She froze. Ethan's perception was sharper than she had given him credit for. She had spent so many years hiding from the world, never allowing herself to truly be seen. And now, as her past threatened to collide with the life she had carefully constructed, she felt exposed in a way she had never imagined. I'm just tired, she said, swallowing hard. I've been juggling too much. It's nothing to worry about. Ethan studied her for a moment, his gaze intense but unreadable. Then he seemed to soften, nodding as if he believed her. If you ever need to talk about anything, you know where to find me. Emma nodded, unable to say anything more. She had always kept her emotions locked away, but now, with the pressure mounting from every side, she felt like she was drowning in the weight of her secrets. As Ethan turned to leave the office, Emma stared at the glowing screen of her computer, her mind consumed by the situation with Leah. She had always been strong, self-sufficient, and independent. But now, with everything she had worked so hard to hide on the verge of spilling over, she realized just how fragile her carefully constructed life had become. The next few days were a blur of lies, half-truths, and anxiety. Emma couldn't shake the fear that her past, and the secret she had spent years protecting, would soon be exposed. And the more she tried to hold it together, the more the cracks began to show. The question that lingered in her mind, like a shadow in the back of her thoughts, was simple. What would Ethan do if he found out the truth? Emma sat across from Leah in a small cafe on the edge of town, far from the prying eyes of the city, and even farther from Ethan's world. Leah's face was pale, her hands trembling as she stirred her untouched cup of tea. Emma reached across the table, placing a hand over her sister's. Leah, we're going to figure this out, Emma said softly. Leah nodded but didn't look up. I'm scared, Emma. I don't know what to do, and I don't want to ruin your life by dragging you into this. Emma sighed, her heart heavy. You're my family. There's nothing to ruin. But you have to trust me, okay? We'll get through this together. What she didn't say, what she couldn't say, was that her life was already a house of cards, teetering on the edge of collapse. She had kept Leah and her complicated past separate from Ethan for a reason. But now the lines were beginning to blur, and she wasn't sure how long she could keep it all together. When she returned home that evening, Ethan was waiting for her in the living room, a glass of whiskey in hand. The room was dimly lit, the city lights glowing faintly through the large windows. He looked up as she walked in, his sharp eyes narrowing slightly. You were gone all day, he said, his voice calm but laced with curiosity. I had some personal errands to run, Emma replied, keeping her tone light. She moved toward the kitchen, avoiding his gaze. Personal errands? Ethan's voice followed her, and she could feel his presence as he walked into the kitchen behind her. You've been distracted lately, Emma, and it's not just work. What's going on? Emma froze for a moment, her back to him. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not when everything felt so precarious. It's nothing, Ethan, she said, finally turning to face him with a forced smile. I'm just adjusting to everything. Ethan studied her, his expression unreadable. You know, for someone who's so good at organizing my life, you're terrible at managing your own. Emma's forced smile faltered, and she felt a flash of anger. I'm not some project, Ethan. I'm handling things the best I can. He raised his hands in mock surrender, his smirk softening into something more genuine. Fair enough, but you should know, I'm not as blind as you think. If something's wrong, I'll find out eventually. His words hung in the air as he turned and walked back to the living room, leaving Emma standing in the kitchen with her heart pounding. She knew Ethan wasn't trying to intimidate her, but his perceptiveness was unsettling. How long before he pieced everything together? Later that night, as she lay awake in bed, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Leah again. "Emma, I think someone's been watching me. I saw a man near my apartment earlier. He looked out of place." Emma's stomach twisted. Her mind immediately jumped to the worst-case scenario. Had someone from Ethan's world found out about Leah? Had the media dug deeper into her past? She quickly replied, "Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone. I'll come by tomorrow." Her fingers trembled as she set the phone down. The walls were closing in, faster than she'd anticipated. The next morning, Ethan noticed her distant demeanor as they prepared for yet another public appearance. He leaned closer, his voice low as they walked toward the waiting car. "Emma, whatever's going on, you're not alone in this. I meant what I said when I asked for your help. You can trust me." Emma wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that Ethan, despite his sharp edges and businesslike demeanor, would understand. But her secret wasn't just hers. It was Leah's too. And the truth was far more complicated than Ethan could imagine. As the car pulled away, Emma stared out the window, her thoughts racing. She had built her life on the foundation of control and discretion. But now, with Leah's situation spiraling and Ethan's curiosity growing, she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep everything from falling apart. What she didn't realize was that Ethan had already started asking questions of his own, and the answers he found would change everything. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the soft glow of his computer screen casting shadows on his face. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. He had spent the past hour reading through a series of private reports his investigator had sent him. Ethan hadn't wanted to dig into Emma's life, but her evasiveness and recent behavior had left him no choice. What he found surprised him. Emma's past wasn't at all what he had imagined. Her carefully curated professionalism masked a history of hardship. The loss of her parents at a young age, her years of working tirelessly to provide for her younger sister Leah, and the weight of secrets she clearly didn't want anyone, especially him, to uncover. But what stood out most was the recent mention of Leah. The investigator's report included vague details about a potential issue Leah was facing. It was unclear, but the hints were enough to paint a picture of someone in trouble. Ethan closed his laptop and sat in the dark for a moment, his mind racing. He wasn't angry, he was concerned. Emma had been his rock for years, the one person he could rely on in a world full of uncertainty. And now it was clear she had been dealing with far more than she let on. The next morning, Emma arrived at the office, her usual calm demeanor slightly frayed at the edges. Ethan watched her as she organized his schedule, her hands moving methodically, but her eyes distant. "Emma," he said softly, interrupting her. She looked up, startled. "Yes?" "We need to talk." Her stomach tightened. She knew this moment was inevitable, but she wasn't ready. "Can it wait? I have a lot to get through today." "No," Ethan said firmly, standing and gesturing toward the seating area in his office. "Now." Reluctantly, Emma followed him, sitting on the edge of the plush leather couch. Ethan leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his sharp gaze fixed on her. "I know something's going on with you," he began, his tone measured but direct. "And I know it involves your sister." Emma froze, her pulse quickening. "Ethan, He held up a hand, cutting her off gently. "I'm not here to accuse you of anything. I just want to understand. You've been there for me always. Let me be there for you now." His words disarmed her. For the first time in weeks, she felt the weight of her secrets pressing down on her chest. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. "It's Leah. She's in trouble." Ethan's expression softened. "What kind of trouble?" "She's pregnant," Emma admitted, the words spilling out in a rush. "And she's scared. She doesn't know what to do, and I've been trying to help her, but it's complicated. There's someone watching her, I think it might be connected to me. Maybe the media, maybe something else. Ethan's jaw tightened, a flicker of protectiveness flashing in his eyes. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? Because I didn't want to drag you into it, Emma said, her voice breaking. Your world is already complicated enough, and this is my problem, not yours. It's our problem now, Ethan said firmly. If someone's watching your sister, it's not just about her, it's about us, about this arrangement we've created, and I won't let anything happen to you or your family. Emma stared at him, stunned by his conviction. She had always seen Ethan as calculating, someone who approached everything, relationships included, with a business-like mindset. But in this moment, he wasn't her boss or her partner in a fake marriage. He was something else entirely. What do we do? She asked softly, the vulnerability in her voice catching her off guard. Ethan stood, his expression resolute. First, we get Leah somewhere safe. Then we figure out who's behind this. If it's the media, we'll shut it down. If it's something else, he paused, his tone darkening. We'll handle it. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt a glimmer of hope. Ethan's presence, his determination, was like a lifeline in the storm. She nodded, her voice steadier now. Thank you, Ethan. I don't know how to repay you for this. You already have, he said quietly. As they began to put their plan into motion, Emma couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something deeper, something real. But with the truth out in the open and new challenges on the horizon, she knew their journey was far from over. The tension in the air was palpable as Ethan and Emma sat in his sleek black SUV, heading toward Leah's apartment. Ethan had insisted on coming with her, his protective instincts in overdrive now that he understood the gravity of the situation. Emma had tried to protest, but one look at his determined expression silenced her. When they arrived, Leah was waiting by the window, her pale face lighting up with relief as she saw Emma step out of the car. She opened the door quickly, throwing her arms around her sister. Emma, thank God you're here, Leah whispered, her voice trembling. It's okay, Emma said softly, holding her close. We're going to figure this out. Ethan followed them inside, his commanding presence filling the small apartment. Leah glanced at him nervously, and Emma introduced him with a reassuring smile. Leah, this is Ethan. He's helping us. Leah nodded, her eyes wide as she looked between them. Thank you for coming. I didn't know who else to call. Ethan gave her a small, reassuring nod. You don't have to worry anymore. We'll make sure you're safe. As they settled into the living room, Leah began to explain. I don't know who he is, she said, her voice shaky. But I've seen the same man outside my building 3 times this week. He doesn't look like a reporter. He just stands there watching. Ethan's jaw tightened, his mind already racing through possible explanations. Did he ever approach you? Say anything? Leah shook her head. Number. But he knows where I live, and that's enough to scare me. Emma reached out, taking Leah's hand. You're coming with us, she said firmly. You can stay at Ethan's house until we figure out what's going on. Leah's eyes widened. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, Ethan interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. Your safety comes first. As they packed some of Leah's belongings, Ethan stepped into the hallway, pulling out his phone. He called his head of security, issuing orders with calm precision. By the time they returned to his home, a team was already in place, ensuring the property was secure. Leah looked around Ethan's sprawling estate, clearly overwhelmed. This is a lot, she murmured, clutching her bag. You'll get used to it, Emma said with a small smile, trying to ease her sister's nerves. That evening, as the 3 of them sat in the living room, the weight of the situation began to settle in. Leah fell asleep on the couch, her exhaustion finally catching up with her. Ethan and Emma moved to the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones. Do you think it's someone connected to the media? Emma asked, her worry etched across her face. It's possible, Ethan said, pouring himself a glass of water. But it could also be someone from your past, someone who knows about your connection to me now. Emma's stomach dropped. What do you mean? Ethan set the glass down, his gaze steady. You've kept your past private for a reason, Emma. But now that we're in the spotlight, Everything about you is under scrutiny. It's not just about me anymore. It's about us." Emma leaned against the counter, the full weight of his words sinking in. She had spent years building a wall around herself, keeping her secrets hidden. But now those walls were crumbling, and she wasn't sure how to stop it. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "there's something I haven't told you." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" Emma hesitated, her heart pounding, but she knew there was no turning back now. "When my parents died, they left behind a debt, a dangerous one. I thought I had paid it off years ago, but if someone's watching Leah, it might mean they're coming after me again." Ethan's eyes darkened, his protective instincts flaring. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" "Because it's my problem," Emma said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to drag you into it." "You're my wife, Emma," Ethan said firmly. "Even if this started as a business arrangement, that doesn't change the fact that I'm not going to let anyone hurt you or your family." His words hit her like a tidal wave, and for the first time, Emma felt a glimmer of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: trust. The next few days were a whirlwind of action. Ethan's security team traced the man Leah had seen, discovering his connection to the loan sharks Emma had dealt with years ago. Ethan personally handled the situation, ensuring the threat was eliminated for good. Through it all, Emma saw a side of Ethan she hadn't expected. A man who wasn't just a calculating CEO, but someone who cared deeply, even when it wasn't convenient. When the danger finally passed, Emma stood on the balcony of Ethan's home, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Ethan joined her, his presence steady and comforting. "Thank you," she said softly, turning to face him. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "I told you, Emma, we're in this together." She looked up at him, her heart full of emotions she couldn't quite name. For the first time, their marriage didn't feel like a performance or a business deal. It felt real.